Hey everybody, it's Sean Gibbons from the Communications Network. Welcome. See folks just now entering the room. So I'm just going to kind of chat at you or yak at you for a minute or two. I believe you are joining us because you're hoping to take part in a community conversation from the Communications Network focused on the events that are unfolding around the country right now in the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd, the murder of Ahmaud Arbery, and the attack on Chris Cooper. The list could go on. You know that. That's probably why you're here. What we're going to do, if you've not been with us before, is we're going to start. This is going to be a little bit different. I'll own this right at the top. This was something we decided to do just this morning. So we don't have a lot of prepared information for you, but we do think it's really critical to create a space for conversation. So we want to start that conversation using this webinar technology from Zoom by starting to get everybody into the chat function. So I'm going to join you there. First thing we do is if you just take your finger or your cursor, whatever you got, go down to that. You should see hovering, a little bar pops up from Zoom. And probably you know this by now from living the Zoom life. Go into that chat function, click it open if you would, and just make sure you're talking to everyone, all panelists and attendees. Make sure that's the default. And then just type in your name, if you would, and where you're from. So your name, where you're from. Hey, Mark, how are you? Where you're from. And then this thing we've been doing from Professor Brene Brown down at the University of Houston, she has this really wonderful idea. It's called a 2-word check-in. Hey, Ellen, how are you coming in from San Francisco? So 2 words, your name, where you're from, and then how you're doing in 2 words. Karen, how are you? Katrina, how are you? So 2 words, gang. Colleen, how are you? 2-word check-in. How are you feeling right now? My guess is you're hopeful. That's good. Brooke, how are you in Princeton? DeKendre, how are you, my friend? Worried and angry. I understand that. Emily in Oakland, activated and eager. Okay, everybody's showing up now. I'm not going to be able to keep up with all of you. But a piece of what we'd like to do over the course of this hour that we're together. Hey, Sarah. Hey, Karen. Betsy, how are you? Jackie, Rachel. Look into the chat. See each other, please. I think it's really important in these kinds of times that we see and appreciate one another. But let's make sure that you are, as Amrit and I are chatting with you, that you all are also chatting with one another. Because I think one of the things we all want to do is try to understand what's going on. How are our different organizations, our social sector organizations, which play such an important leadership role in our society, how are we showing up in this moment? So we can use this chat, and we're going to try to make this interactive. One of the other things I'm going to just tell you all that we're going to try to do is, because the Zoom webinar technology is such, we can't bring everybody in together that we could see each other, which we really wish we could do. We're going to ask you a couple of points in the course of this next hour. We're going to ask you to sort of raise your hand or put your name up into the chat, and we're going to promote you up so that we can all talk together. And it's going to be kind of scary because you're going to be sitting in front of the, however many there are of us now, 164 or so of us who are in this room right now. But we think it's really important to make sure that this isn't just people talking at you, but that we're really having space for conversation. The other thing I should tell you is our colleague Kareem Alston is making notes in Google. And so we will share back the notes from everything that's generated in this hour with all of you very, very soon. We're also going to be making a recording of this. So you will have this up online, and we'll share this with you tomorrow. Or perhaps later today. The other thing I would encourage you to do is we've got the network listserv, and we will be asking you to share ideas, tips, information, links to materials that perhaps you're creating. You can also do that in the chat. Just a couple other names I'm seeing here. Marlet, how are you? Sad and helpless. Yeah, I know. And Jade. And maybe Jade, I hope you saw my email. I'm going to do something, and I kind of have your permission, but not Jade. I was hoping, could I share a little bit from your note to me, and then maybe we could promote you for a quick moment, if you're okay with that. Could I share a little bit of your note, Jade? Jaden, you all should just know this, and I'm going to go ahead and give this piece of it up from Jade. Tristan, if you would promote Jade really quickly. This is personal to all of us. And that's because if you know Jade Floyd, then you might surmise that George Floyd is a member of her family. He is. So the Floyd family is particularly in pain right now. And I'm just going to share a note. We were chatting through email a little bit earlier this morning, and this is what she wrote to me. It's an absolutely beautiful thing. And I'm going to invite Jade to talk to us for a quick minute. Hey, Jade. So I'm just going to read this. Jade is at home. I believe she's holding Jasper right now, and you are. Who is a beautiful little girl. And I'm just going to read this and try to keep together. If I lose it, Jade, maybe you can help me out. Well, this is Jade's words. Having the family witness this unfold, the murder of George Floyd, unfold on national television saddens me beyond measure. While at the same time, I'm strangely thankful that it was his death that uprooted a nationwide uproar of this magnitude by complete strangers who said this is enough. You've been killing Black men for too long in this world, and it needs to cease now. Unfortunately, this is not how the family wanted his memory to be left, with destruction and chaos on the streets. And while I hope this ignites a change in the world, I sadly can't help but think he's just another statistic. Tomorrow there will be another, and another, and another, until the world fixes itself and realizes Black men are a gift they've been killing too long. Nevertheless, I'm thankful there are people like you, and that means all of us, who are in the world, raising time in humans who will be better than all of us. And Jade, maybe with that, those beautiful words, if I don't mean to put you on the spot, but if you have any thoughts to share with the community here, I'm grateful that you're with us. And everybody should know Jade Floyd is the vice chair of the Communications Network and is likely, or it will be our chair come this fall.
Yeah, well, Sean, thank you so much for joining all of us together. And, you know, as a member of the Floyd family, and I will say I'm very thankful to see the good that is coming out of this. While there's a lot of chaos and there's a lot of uproar in the world, there's also so much good, and there's so many people out there who really are trying to be better humans and to be the change that we need to see in this world. And as I sit here holding this tiny little 7-week human, you know, I think I'm so thankful that she is going to be the future, and that all of us are raising our children to be better than we were, than our grandparents were, and our ancestors were. And I think that there's a lot of hope that I see in this next generation, but I'm also seeing hope from the people and the friends and the family and, you know, the Communications Network community. The thoughts that you all have shared with me have been instrumental in the healing process for me, and I've shared them with our family. And I'm just so thankful that we're now at a moment in time, and we will look back on this in history and say, this was a pivotal moment for our country. And while there was so much negativity that also came out of it, and there's so much destruction, I think that it is a shining beacon to show that the world is changing, and that there are people out there who want to see a new world that does not include hate, and it doesn't include bigotry, and it does not include sexism. And I'm really optimistic that all the people on this call will be a part of creating that world, and that all of your little tiny humans that you might have too, or the people in your lives, are ones that will change the course and heal all the wounds that we've for so long had a part of our communities.
And Jade, as you were talking and holding Jasper there, we're getting a lot of messages and people thanking you and expressing their condolences and appreciating the bravery of taking the time to be with us. I don't want to put you much further on the spot, so I think we'll let you enjoy the rest of this, or participate with the rest of us with a little bit more anonymity. We are going to go forward, and what we hope to do over this course of this hour is Amrit Dillon is joining us. If you've been with us at ComNet in the past, you may recall in Miami and again in San Francisco, she joined us to lead sessions focused on understanding the role that we can all play and be constructive forces for good within our own organizations, within our communities, and more broadly within our society. So Amrit's going to be taking over in just a quick minute, but I want to flag for you a few resources that we can use. And Lori, I agree, Jade, makes us all feel optimistic, and it's incredibly, just extraordinary. The family is feeling this pain, but coming with from such a place of hope and optimism at a time of such deep grief and loss. We want to share with you some resources that we think we can use as a professional community to help one another. The first is this listserv. We created this several weeks ago now, maybe a few months ago now, to try to help one another connect and share information in light of this pandemic, which of course is just another layer to the complexity that we're all dealing with. But we encourage you all. It is free. It is open. You do not need to be a paid member of the Communications Network to participate, because we think that the good can come from connecting people, ought not to come with a price tag. So it is available to everybody. The link and URL are there. Tristan, if you wouldn't mind too terribly, please go ahead. Our colleague Tristan Mahabir is sheltering in place down in Florida, is sharing the slides for us. We also want to make sure that you know there's a resource in the form of folks within your community where you live. There are ComNetwork local groups, 17 of them now, that gather gather and building community in 17 cities around the United States. They're in Dallas and in Austin, Boston, San Francisco, Seattle, New York, Washington, D.C., Miami, Atlanta, Detroit, Chicago. I mean, I can go on with the list, but suffice to say, it's a long one, 17 names. Our hope is over the next couple of weeks that those groups who have been meeting over the last couple of months virtually will have the chance to gather so that we can understand that the folks in Denver, how their communities are coming together and how foundations and nonprofits are helping one another can actually gather in more of a Zoom meeting format where they can talk and exchange ideas. So please do avail yourselves of Com Network Local, and we will make sure that, that they are able to gather all of you so that we can build partnerships and community in the places where you work and live. All right, Tristan, if you would go ahead, sir, please, and take us forward. And so now I'm going to pass the mic to my colleague, Amrit Dillon. Amrit worked until very, very recently with our friend and dear colleague, Michelle Norris, who created the Race Card Project. You're seeing the logo for that work here. She started that when she was an anchor at NPR. Michelle, as you all know, was one of the lead anchors of All Things Considered. She subsequently left NPR because this became such a powerful force in her life and started a project called The Bridge at the Aspen Institute, and Amrit joined her in that work there. And Amrit, as I mentioned earlier, has joined us for the last few comments to help us really go through this kind of process of conversation, which we think is so critical. So Amrit, with that, why don't you go ahead and take it away, and everybody, if you will just stay in that chat, keep talking to one another. That's going to be a piece of our project here today.
Thanks, Sean, and thank all of you for joining us. I've been COVIDing in place very far from home for months, so bear with me. I have some notes. I think I figured it out, but I wanted to be as articulate as possible because I am an expert on this, and I have so luckily not have to feel the pain that so many people like Jada felt, but I know that so many of us are just having such an emotion right now. So I have been privileged enough to read thousands and thousands of submissions through the Race Car Project inbox through my work with Michelle. And also gotten to hear firsthand hundreds of stories from folks as we travel the country doing conversations basically about race and identity. We had the opportunity to sit in the Civil Rights Room in Nashville at the public library and work with a group of citizens who were doing police ride-alongs for timing. That was an interesting one just to hear them talk about race. And that campus actually opened up the collection process to the community. And I got a note that there was a young woman who ended up writing a story about a 6-word story about the fear that she had about losing her undocumented parents. So the work that the Race Car Project has done has touched so many. And I really just wanted to start today to read some of the stories that we've collected over the years. Police harassed undercover cop wearing hoodie. It's from a guy named V who wanted to stay anonymous. He tells his story. He's Latino and was wearing a hoodie, was working undercover and was in a diner grabbing lunch and was subject to some harassment until he finally had to share with them that he was a cop working undercover. China from Vallejo, California. Love white privilege, hate white privilege. Sarah from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Terrified, we watch them set fires. Mark from Pacific Grove, California. With kids, I'm dad. Alone, thug. Mary Lou from St. Paul, Minnesota. Welfare, black faces televised, white missing. Michael from Elk Grove, California. White, black, Latino, Asian, or human. Bernard from Holland, Michigan. Black, but I don't fear police. And Kristen from Hawaii. Restore hope, peace, love, unity, respect. I know as Sean said and Jade said, so many of us are struggling right now with like what we're seeing on the news every hour. We're looking for answers on what we can do, what we should do. And there's very smart people, most of you among them, who have solutions. There are documents and projects and experts that are in the days and months and years ahead, probably going to help us and act and propose real change. I share that optimism. But right now, we're hoping that this is a space, and I applaud Sean for his work on this, even at the last minute. I'm honored to be part of this. But we hope this is a space where we can all see and hear and be seen and heard. To start a conversation, because one of the most important lessons that we learned from our work is how powerful listening is. Because when we listen to each other and we understand who we are and where we come from and what we're experiencing, we build empathy. When we build empathy, we start to realize we're a lot more alike than we are different. The stories that we had when we had people in a room from all different walks of life, and they realize they're parents, or they share the same faith traditions, or they have the same family traditions, you start to see connection points, and you don't see people as others, and you start to understand a little bit more about what somebody might be going through. These stories that come from our colleagues, our friends, the work that we all do from our constituents, help us create that understanding about people and perspectives. And they're the things that give context, these stories, to the data and the metrics and the policy proposals that we all have. And I think we really need that context right now. Another really important takeaway from our work was that these conversations cannot only be had by people of color. It is critical that all of us are be willing to engage, to sit at that table, think about that table too and who you have at it, and to make sure that no matter how uncomfortable, we're there, but we're listening and we're hearing and we're acknowledging, because that's how we're all going to be an active part of this solution. It's not up to one group to fix this. I have no doubt that most of you have already thought about this. You're all doing this work in incredible ways. I am preaching to the choir. So I think what we wanted to do here was just to start the conversation, really to, create a space, a brave space and a safe space where right now we can just share and kind of be human with one another. So I think that's what we're hoping. Sharing your stories. I know that they sent around a Google Doc where you can share your 6-word stories. And we're going to pass those on to the Race Car Project to add to their archives. I encourage you to check out that website. Michelle used to say, when she's feeling bad, and so you all know she is from Minneapolis. She grew up in Minneapolis, and I spoke with her briefly this morning, and she is penning something incredible. Just the idea that we can be human. Take it away, Sean.
So Amrit, I think we lost you a little bit there, but what Amrit was trying to say, just in the joy of the Zoom world of Wi-Fi interruptions, our friend Michelle Norris was born and raised in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So this is all an especially personal and very well-known place to her. But it's not just what occurred in Minneapolis, and I don't want to in any way diminish the danger and awfulness that we all witnessed through video. One of the extraordinary things of our 21st century is we were able to see things that before we just didn't see, or were able to not see, maybe if we chose not to see, if we weren't part of networks that shared these stories. Lord knows the media didn't always share these stories. But it's hard not to see that video and not be have the reactions that we've seen. We have a number of our colleagues. One of the things we wanted to promise to you was creating a space for everyone to share how their organizations are responding. And again, we're trying to just kind of figure this out in real time, gang, so this isn't meant to be super polished. But what we'd like to do is call on a few of our friends to join us, just as Jade did. And so Stefan Lanford, who's the network's board chair. Stefan, would you mind joining us here? Would that be okay? Could we go ahead and promote you? And Stefan just put a message from Jim Canales, the president of the Bar Foundation, into the chat. So y'all are welcome to share that. And Kareem will put that into the notes that we're making, and so that we'll all be able to benefit from that a little bit later. And Stefan's joining us now. Stefan, you are muted, and let's see if we can see you on camera. Maybe make sure your camera is on, sir. And Stefan, your audio is up, I think, and we can see you. How are you, sir? Do you want to just explain to us what's going on at the Bar Foundation right now, and how you all are thinking about what's been occurring across the nation and within Boston over the last couple of days?
I think, sure. I think our situation is like many, that we're just reeling from what we're seeing all around us, and felt like we couldn't be silent at this moment. So it's a piece that Jim worked on over the weekend and shared with me last night, and we sped our way to getting it up this morning. And for us, we've been on our own journey related to diversity, equity, inclusion as an organization, and began this year talking about that, and it's really just brought home to us how that lens needs to be applied to everything that we do. It's inescapable now. So that's the substance of what we shared today.
So Stefan, a question for you, because there have been some conversations, even within the network listserv, in whether it was issues related to the pandemic or now some of the events that are unfolding around the country, where there's been some advice given to our colleagues that said, stay in your lane. You chose not to, whatever your lane was, you were making a public statement. Why? And what was required to get there? What kind of conversations occurred internally, insofar as you can share that?
Well, I think the calculus for us is, is it in our lane? And I think on this topic, it's very clear that it's everywhere. It's everywhere in the world that we live, and so it felt it touches our values, it touches who we are, and it's the compass for our work. And we're just really didn't take a lot of discussion this time. It was pretty clear.
And what's the goal of the piece? What were you trying to achieve there?
I mean, it's certainly a statement of solidarity. It's calling out the racism that's apparent in all of these events. There's no other word for it, and committing ourselves to continuing that work in that light.
Yeah, my sense is for a lot of us who do this work, one of the things we oftentimes walk past is just the power of joining. We've certainly seen it when you look in at the evening news or the cable shows, the newspaper right now. You see people gathering. By the way, I hate this picture. I don't think this is representative of the protests. I think that's the other thing that's worth remembering. Most of the things that are happening in this country are peaceful demonstrations and protests that are our rights as Americans. These pictures that are being chosen by editors, front page editors, I understand that they're certainly sensational, but they are not productive, nor are they reflective of the vast majority, 90-something% of the people who are participating are coming in peace, seeking to exercise their rights. So I do think it's really, really critical, particularly for our organizations. And Tristan, maybe you could take the slide forward, please. Conversation is crucial. So I'm going to invite others to join us now. And Amrit, I would encourage you also to just sort of, as you're hearing from folks, if you have questions for Stefan, maybe before we let him go. Do you have a question, Amrit? And you're muted right now, my friend.
I am, aren't I? I'm actually just curious, because I think this is something that a lot of people deal with. How much consternation or pushback was there? I know you guys are leading in a lot of folks and putting things out there. Sean and I talked earlier about, I was in awe watching REI and Backcountry issue Black Lives Matter statements very simply immediately last night. But I know that a lot of people, this is a tough topic. This is something people are scared to touch, particularly if it doesn't. One of our theories is that race and racism touch everything. We had that conversation this morning. But is there a lot of discussion, and how do you convince folks that might be a little hesitant just to, engage and make a statement within your own team?
It's a great question. I mean, for us, and Jim's message today is really also about action, because there certainly there are times when we have felt that, the reason to speak is because silence speaks too, and silence is unacceptable. I think our message today, the title of it is, actions greater than words. And so it was an expression of intention around the actions that are ongoing for us, informed by a commitment to equity. But it's a great question. And maybe a different calculus for an REI issuing its statement of solidarity.
Yeah, for my part, I am struck by the fact that there are so many businesses. In fact, the CEO of Merck came out this morning and suggested that it could easily have been him. He's an African-American man, and that the business community needed to play a role in leading. But I'm certainly mindful that, and I think many of you all know this, our friends at Independent Sector did a survey. This would be a couple of years ago, so the data is a little dated, but probably not wrong, and certainly probably within the realm of discussing. They polled folks, they employed a Democratic pollster and a Republican pollster and looked at Americans across ideologies. And what they found was the vast majority of Americans, a stunning majority of Americans, 75% of Americans thought of foundations and nonprofits, broadly speaking, as constructive forces for good in society, and that 85% wanted to hear more from them. So wanted us to take more of a vocal leadership role in American life, certainly at a time when leadership seems to be well, I'll reserve judgment there. I think y'all can offer an end to that conversation within the chat if you wish, but this is certainly a place and an opportunity for those of us to lead. I mean, the truth is all the organizations that we represent exist because we see the status quo and understand that there's an opportunity to improve our society, to improve lives. And this is certainly a place where I don't think that we can or should be silent. I know we have a number of other colleagues who've done some work here, so maybe we could invite them to join. Krista Yankee from the Kresge Foundation, I'm going to put you on the spot. Tristan, do you mind promoting Krista? Because I know you all put out a statement as well. Krista is one of our leaders from Com Network Detroit up in Michigan, and they've been very, very forthright and thoughtful. And so Krista, hopefully you'll join us in just a quick second here as Tristan promotes her.
Hello.
There she is. Hey, my friend, how are you?
I'm good. Hi.
Hey, can you tell us a little bit about what Kresge's been doing over the last couple of days, and specifically just the thinking behind it, some of the sort of the strategy or some of the outcomes and goals that you all are after to maybe help our colleagues think about how they can be or should or could be taking action potentially in the coming days?
Well, sure. So if anyone is unfamiliar, Kresge's a national foundation, and we work in cities to expand opportunity, and racial equity is a big focus of the foundation. Our president is Rip Rapson, and he is actually a Minneapolis native and was deputy mayor of Minneapolis at one point. So this has hit close to home for him. And, you know, so something that Rip has been doing since the beginning of the pandemic is he has been sending a daily email to staff at the end of the day where he, so this is really just an internal communications that he decided he wanted to do to sort of connect us together during this time when we're all working remotely. And he often tries to find something humorous. He'll poke fun at things that are going on. It's not usually very serious. It's more lighthearted and just a way to sort of add some commentary and some lightness to what we're all facing. But this last week, obviously those letters, it just wasn't appropriate. And he had much more serious things to say that he wanted to share with us. So for a number of days, you know, Rip writes these himself, and they were just very beautiful, meaningful letters that, you know, as a communication staff, a few of us just said, like, these are beautiful, and they, you know, are saying something important right now that we as Kresge think we should be saying. And it was really not much of a debate at all. It was just, you know, once there was a few of them, we were like, we need to share these with the world because they say so much of what we're all about right now. And we don't want to sit back during this during this moment. And so we really just took them and sort of strung them together almost like in a diary format. And I put the link in the chat. So we put that out on Friday. So yeah, not, you know, a super long discussion and not something, there was really no long debate. And, you know, I think what our hope is just to, you know, just show up as we, for what we value right now. And I do think if you're silent in this moment, you know, that does mean something. And so it is important if your values are on the line right now to stand up for them. And so that's what we did.
Gotcha. Thank you for sharing that. I think, is there any outcomes you all are hoping for from this? I don't mean to put you on the spot. I think there's a lot of power, as I said, just in joining. And Tristan, maybe you could pull the slide forward, but anything that you all were thinking about as you were pulling that together, this might help in this way?
I don't know, honestly, that we had that kind of a really strategic outcomes in mind. I think it was very reactive in the moment as things were unfolding so quickly last week. I mean, we just today have started to sort of outline like what's next and start to really think a little bit more about that. We have a Boys and Men of Color work group within the foundation, which actually just met. So, you know, we're thinking about the grant making response. And I think with that comes sort of a bigger communications and narrative sort of structure around it. So, you know, I think sometimes outcomes are sort of secondary to being opportunistic in a moment when there's just something that needs to be said. And, you know, the exact outcome that we had in mind wasn't maybe as clear as, you know, it should be, but I think it's just sort of standing up in that moment and not being silent.
I think that that's incredibly important. Can I ask you a question, actually, on behalf of our friend Kitty at the Pittsburgh Foundation? So Kitty Julian wrote in and she said, are any of your foundations making new grants related to anti-racism, support for social justice, motivated by recent events? Maybe everybody could answer that in the chat. Is anybody doing new grant making that's sort of been very much a quick pivot? But is that something that you all are exploring? I know it's part of the work you do now, but is there anything new that's come of light in the last couple of days, last week or two?
Yes. Yeah, so it is part of our work, our ongoing work, but yeah, I mean, I was just, like I said, I was just in a work group for that, so sort of a cross foundation work group that's specifically about boys and men of color funding, and you know, they're really trying to think immediately, what can we do as long, and what can we do that's responsive to this moment, but that also will sustain some of these communities and really support partners that we have now on the ground in the anti-racism work that they've been doing. So we're definitely thinking about that.
Gotcha. No, thank you very, very much. I want to invite a few more of our colleagues just to join. Thank you, Krista. I know I just kind of pulled you up out of the blue, so I appreciate the bravery, and I'm grateful. And if I could put you on the spot even further, do you all and the team in Detroit mind gathering that Detroit community so you guys can have more of a focused conversation? Would that be possible?
Well, we're actually planning for a gathering next week, which was really supposed to be an open floor to talk about how we're at this moment still thinking about COVID and then going forward for the rest of the year. And I haven't sent the email out because in my head, I'm like, do we need to pivot this conversation to be a little bit more, you know, things have just changed so much since Friday. So yeah, I think that might happen.
Okay, great. Thank you very, very, very much. Kiara Wagner from Nellie Mae Foundation. If you don't mind, I think you'd raised your hand. If we can pull you up, I know you all had also done a little work recently. Maybe just share where you're coming from, and if you don't mind, Tristan will promote you. Take just a quick second to get you live. If you're still there, or did you leave the chat? Looks like you maybe left. Is that right, Tristan?
I'm here. I'm just putting my video on. There we go.
Okay. There you are, my friend. How are you? How are things in Boston?
I'm good.
It's nice to see you.
Okay. You too. I shared our statement that our president, Nick, put out this morning in the chat. I think similar to what Krista was saying, I think we thought that the title of the piece that Nick wrote is Silence is Complicity. The idea that words really do matter and not speaking also is a message. And, you know, I think on top of that, what was important to us as an organization was not that just that we were standing up for our values and talking about it and writing about it, but showing what steps we were taking as an organization and as individuals. So that's kind of part of the piece too, kind of sharing what we're doing in terms of our grant making. And also, you know, Nick kind of talking about, you know, white people, we need to step up and take action and hold each other accountable. So that was really an important thing that we wanted to share in our piece as well.
Gotcha. And was there any new grant making or things of that nature that you all might be taking on in the coming days? I don't mean to put you on the spot.
Yeah, no, I think that's still part of ongoing conversations. It is kind of part of our ongoing work. As for those that don't know, Nellie Mae, we're a regional funder based in Boston, but we cover the New England region, and our focus is on racial equity in public education. We did recently put together some rapid response grants around COVID, specifically looking at racism against anti-Asian racism and racism against Asian American and Pacific Islanders. So that was kind of one response fund that we had recently, but I think the ongoing pieces are still part of our conversation.
Gotcha. And we have a question from our friend Kelly. Actually, it just disappeared, but I believe her question was, should we be thinking about putting out statements if equity is not a part of our declared mission or not part of our values? And I'd invite everybody to answer that in the chat, but maybe just to, again, Kiara, without knowing exactly, I know you all do a lot of equity work. Is it expressly part of your mission statement, or is it something that's, okay. Could you understand?
It is, yeah. Our mission statement is around advancing racial equity in public education. But I think, I mean, you know, it's not just for, like, this impacts everybody. So I mean, I would encourage organizations who aren't directly focused on equity or racism to speak up, even if that means sharing things from other organizations. So I would encourage folks to do so.
Okay. Anything that was cause for concern? It's always worth sort of doing a pre-mortem sometimes when we're taking actions. In this case, I have a hard time seeing what the downside is, but was there anything that you all surfaced in these conversations with Nick that you thought, let's just be mindful, we know what we're walking into?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a downside necessarily, but we always think about, like, what are the responses we're going to get? And we did get some negative responses
Really?
from this piece. Folks that were saying we're being too political. And why can't we all just come together and talk about this? So, you know, that's not really surprising to me, but it's something that we're prepared to speak out and get those types of responses to advance this work. And I think it's something that we have to face as communicators as part of our job.
Yeah, no, I think, look, my own belief, and my guess is everybody who's here believes this as well. Communications is a strategic lever for change, that whatever ideas are that sit inside of the four walls where we work, or now the many walls where we're all working around the place, and have the good fortune to do so, they only really get lifted up and come to life when they move out into the wider world, and that's a communications task. And sometimes a piece of that work is, and Tristan, maybe you could pull this into the next slide. If I'm remembering correctly, I think we have, the power of listening is a big piece of this. As you all know, and I think many of you probably participated in this, we did a survey recently looking at how our organizations were all responding in the wake of the pandemic. And we're actually going to be sharing that, we hope, early next week, the results. But one of the things I can share with you all, and I hope this doesn't surprise you, but I have to confess it surprised the hell out of me, was when we all pivoted in just now it seems almost like years ago, but just a couple months ago, and started working from home and reacting to the deadly coronavirus, most folks testified that they took immediate actions, shifted their storytelling, made lots of changes in the way that they were working. But one thing they didn't do was listening. And so maybe a question, Kiara, to you, but also to everybody in the chat, share with everybody. Please make sure, by the way, you're setting your defaults to all panelists and attendees so we can be talking to each other. How were you all listening, or how do you all make listening part of your work? Because I think that's a crucial element of communications, is just the listening piece.
Yeah, I mean, we do it in the informal ways that you would think of, like, you know, so through social media, listening, having conversations with our grantees. I think one example that might be useful to folks, over the past year, we have brought on a community advisory to our organization.
Can you talk about what that is?
Yeah, those are a group of folks that are living and working in the communities that we serve through our grant making. So as an education organization, it includes educators, community organizers, parents, young people. So we bring them into a lot of the conversations we're having as an organization. That includes communications. I have a small working group of folks who I run ideas past. I ask for their feedback. We ask them how things are going on the ground in the communities that they're working in, so that we're really making sure that we're listening, and our work and our communications is informed by the people that we really are in service to support as a philanthropic organization. So it's been a great learning experience for us, and I think is one like formal way to support listening through communications and other aspects of a foundation.
No, that's a really terrific idea. So, and just, I don't mean to sort of bog us down here, but that is another input that you all have through that community group. How long have you had it, and how did you construct it?
So we have had our community advisory, I should say, probably like a year and a half now. And a number of my colleagues were really instrumental in putting the group together. I think some of the folks are former grantees, others are leaders in the racial equity in public education space. So we receive recommendations from other grantees about who might be good fits for this board, and we kind of brought the advisory together for initial kind of onboarding, and we have quarterly meetings in person. Recently, they've been virtual throughout the year, and then there's various touch points with staff on top of that, where I might loop them into a communications meeting, or for example, if I just recently was working on a new messaging guide, I might just say, hey, do you have a few minutes to chat about this? Would love your feedback on that. So sort of informally too, we get feedback from them. And it's just been a really, really great learning experience for us as funders.
That sounds just tremendous and a good lesson for all of us. And if you don't mind, can people follow up with you? They can find you through the—
Of course, yeah, I'll put my email in the chat, yep.
Okay, that's awesome. So there's a question coming in, gang, and I'd like to actually put this to everybody in the chat. Again, make sure you're set to all panelists and attendees, but everybody wants to hear about it. And the question is this: there seems to be risk in making a public statement when you don't have your own diversity house in order. Not enough diversity on your staff. Like Stefan had said earlier, we're on our journey with that. Any thoughts on that? And this is put out to everybody. I'm worried we'll get blowback on a public statement when we don't have enough diversity on our own staff. I have some thoughts, but y'all don't need to hear what I think. I'm curious to hear what you all think if you put that into the chat. Reaction to, can you reasonably, credibly make a statement in this moment when perhaps your own organization is not where it needs to be on its journey? And Tristan, while we're doing that, maybe we could move the slide forward.
There's something that I was going to add about when we're talking about listening, and when I saw that question from some of the partners that we worked with, the idea of it's so important, and I've done a ton of work with this kind of constituent listening work, and it sounds like they're doing a great job, but it's then what do you do? There's been a couple chats here about then how are you actually putting things into action? And I think you have to, this sort of speaks to the question, be so transparent. Like, there's also a question in here from Kitty about, so how do you balance it without asking like the people of color on your staff, especially if there's only a handful, to do all the work? That's what we were saying about everybody at the table listening, but then actually making sure that you're committed from the very top level to do something. I think what we learned was if you're transparent and you're authentic in your efforts, understanding we're not there yet, like Stefan said, we're working on this, we're doing this, we're all kind of playing a role. I think it helps. You're gonna get blowback sometimes from folks, but if everyone's scared of sort of that starting point, or we're listening just to say that we listened, or, you know, we did a survey and we want our constituents, you know, our clients to tell us what they're thinking, but we don't actually then change any of our policies internally or externally, that's when people start to stop believing we're kind of just doing the same thing. And I know I talked a little bit about brave space, you know, safe space. It's scary. I think there's some data around so many folks and some of the stories that we had about when you talk about race or you address it, like don't expect to get promoted. When we talk with the corporate sector, like you're not going to get that job or that promotion if you're the one that brings this up. And I think probably foundations and nonprofits in the same way, like a little trepidatious about what's this going to do to funding. Someone had a comment about social media followers, you'll lose some eventually if people think you're being political. But I think it's really about the values and like what is actually important, what are you trying to do? But I think I would just argue, if you're going to listen or you're saying you're listening, do something with that. There's a lot of folks on the ground that are asked their opinions and are asked their thoughts, and they give them, and then nothing happens with that. And that starts to make people think you're not actually authentic or being really legitimate what you're doing. And we understand how many things are kind of behind the scenes, but I think the more that you can be transparent and share that, we've noticed that goes a long way with a community, with your staff, with stakeholders.
Our colleague, and there's a bunch of these, I encourage everybody, perhaps you're already doing this, but in the chat, folks are answering this question. Our friend DeKendre puts this one up, which I think is particularly helpful. You can walk and chew gum, be an ally, and speak to similarly profiled organizations while working to fix the in-house issue. Perfection is not required, but action is. And I do think we've heard this over and over again over the course of our time together here, that silence speaks loudly, very, very loudly. Would love to invite our colleague Jennifer Oldham coming in from Nashville to join us and just talk a little bit about the work that's happening at the Healing Trust. So Tristan, if you don't mind promoting Jenny, she'll be with us in just a quick second. And while we're doing that, the slide that you're seeing up here is Narrative Shape the World. This goes back to basic brain science. I'm guessing y'all know this, that, you know, the way that we even think about the work that we do as social sector organizations is shaped by narratives that we have decided that, you know, I'll give you one that many of us are familiar with, you know, the purpose of business is to make a profit. That is a widely shared belief, conventional wisdom. It's a narrative. It is not true. It is just actually a statement of opinion, but we've organized ourselves around it in really profound ways. And so there are narratives that sometimes contain us and constrain us. And one of, I think, our challenges right now in this country is thinking about some of the narratives that we hold to be true around race and racism. And what we're seeing from many of our fellow citizens is a deep dissatisfaction with the status quo, and that there are opportunities to break free from some of the stories that we have told ourselves over time, and to really, in some cases, awaken folks to the necessity of that. It's a real, this is what white privilege looks like, frankly. We had a conversation between the network board and former New Orleans Mayor Mitch Landrieu recently, and he shared with us that he, as many of you probably know, he was responsible for removing the Confederate monuments that were scattered throughout the city of New Orleans. They're no longer there, but he confessed that he was actually someone who had, a native of New Orleans, grew up there and had never noticed them until his friend Wynton Marsalis actually pointed them out. We can have a longer conversation about all of that later, but he walked through this city completely oblivious to the impact and meaning and symbolic messages and powerful messages that those statues represented. And I think we have to be mindful. Communication happens all over the place in many ways, and we have an opportunity in front of us. And with that, our friend Jennifer is with us. How are you, my friend? It's good to see you healthy and well.
Hello. That's a loaded question. I don't know how to tell you that I am, but I am here.
That is a loaded question, isn't it? Well, maybe I should say your body is, you don't have COVID-19 to be really crass about.
Correct.
Okay, good. How are you? Maybe that's a better question to ask.
Yeah, I'm okay. I think I'm about as okay as a person of color, Black person specifically, can be at this time. Our org released a statement today. We're in Nashville, so I don't know if you all know this, but we just had a peaceful protest that was later infiltrated and turned violent, and we're under curfew. So that has been an interesting experience. I saw someone ask the question in the chat box about whether or not we released a statement if it was from everyone. Our statement was from everyone, not just the CEO.
Can you talk about why that would be? Why would you do that? I think that's fantastic, but what was the thinking behind that?
You know, it's a very rare moment that any statement comes out that's just from the CEO, because we're a team. And for us, if we are going to infuse equity in everything we do, that's just not the sole responsibility of the CEO. And so it comes from all of us.
That's really, that makes a lot of sense, but I'm guessing that is not the practice of everyone. It was certainly something worth hearing. When you all were putting out the statement, what were you trying to achieve, and how did it come together? Maybe just walk us through that process a little bit.
Our process pretty much started on Friday. And what happened, so we're a small foundation. There are only 6 of us, and there are 2 of us who are people of color. And so, as you can imagine, the 2 of us who are people of color were having a slightly different day than everybody else in the organization. And so there was a moment, we actually discussed it through Teams initially. And what I said was, we've put out statements before at various times. We put out something after Charlottesville, like, we need to do this again. But I was honest with my colleagues, and I said, in this particular moment, I can't write this statement. I said, I understand that I am the director of communications here, but also this is too much emotional labor for me at this moment. So while the statement needs to come from us, you all are gonna have to do the work on it. And I can come back to it, and I can edit it, and I can wordsmith it, but I can't write this one at this moment. And they were like, okay, we hear you and we got it. And they took care of it on the weekend. And when I got in this morning, they sent it to me and were like, what do you think? And I read it and I was like, okay, if it's fine. I don't have any edits, but if that's what you want to put out there, then let's do it. And we did it.
I can hear the emotion in your voice, my friend. And I just wish I was closer. I'd give you a hug. This is really hard. Yeah, or elbows or whatever we're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Any thoughts that you want folks to leave with? And I don't want to put the burden on you, but we have an audience of a couple hundred of our colleagues. And if you have a thought that you want to share, I think folks are here to listen.
I think probably the first thing is to notice the humanity of the people on your team. Because if you can start there, I think it will permeate, but I think oftentimes that gets overlooked. And so I do have a great team, but I recognize that that is not the case for everybody.
Yeah, we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do. Well, thank you. I know I put you on the spot, my friend. I hope to see you before too long. I think, Amrit, do you have a question for Jennifer before we let her run?
I think she said everything she needed to say. And I think it just goes back to the, like, listen to your people, listen to your colleagues. Start there, right? We're all doing really big work, but there's people, right? We're all people. So the more that you can speak up, the more that other people can understand where someone's coming from or recognize that without them having to say it necessarily. Jennifer has to tell them, but let's pay a little bit more attention. I think that was just a really good story and a really good lesson. And it starts kind of, I don't want to say it starts at home, but it starts at home. We talked about our kids, our colleagues, our friends, our families. Like, let's start there. Like, we're doing big things, the big world, but it's those little things that are gonna be really important and give us all kind of more humanity and more understanding.
And I see a couple of folks in the chat are asking. Jennifer is with an organization called the Healing Trust. They're in Nashville, Tennessee. And Jennifer, the URL, in case folks wanted to see that statement, if they just went on the main website, would they be able to find it?
Oh, not yet. Give me like 15 minutes. It's currently on our social media, but I have plans to get it up there in a minute.
Gotcha. Okay, always worth knowing. So it can get done, but before you post it up. So, but if everybody Googles the Healing Trust, and we'll take responsibility for sharing this on Twitter or social a little bit later as well, after you had a chance to post it, you can find it there. Tristan, if you would move to thank you, my friend. I'll talk to you soon. Tristan, if you'll add to the next slide. I'm trying to remember what we put up here. Amr, could you speak to this? These are some of the key messages coming out of the work that you and Michelle did at the Race Card Project.
Yeah, and I think we've covered a lot of this. We'll keep it short. I mean, race versus racism. I think some of the fear that people have, we've talked about trepidation, there's a difference. Like when we're talking about race, like that exists. That's a thing. It can be beautiful. Everything's got a racial dimension. Racism is bad. Racism is bad. Race is important, needs to be embraced. Let's recognize the difference and know when you speak up about something and when you embrace it and what you do with it. So I think we just really were clear about the difference between the two. Don't conflate them. And skill building, it's back to what we're talking about, listening, interviewing, like, where are you building those skills? It takes work sometimes, right? We think we know, we think we assume, we get busy, like we have hierarchies, but are you listening? Are you building a team? Like, are you really thinking about some of this stuff that's affecting folks? I don't know that a lot of people think about how's my team, what does my team look like? And how are they feeling something very, very differently from I'm feeling it? Like, I feel hurt.
I think we're getting a little bit more of the Zoom gremlins, right? So Tristan, if we can move to the next slide. I can hear you now, pal. Yeah, I got you now. And so now we've got the other slides up, if you can see that the everyone in bottom line.
The other two, I talked a little bit about that, everyone in. Jennifer just talked a little bit about that. Like, don't make this be led by people of color. You need those perspectives. Don't put the onus on people of color. Don't put the onus on women. Like, just take responsibility. Everyone's got to step up. This has to be an everybody in conversation. That's not fair. And it's hard sometimes for people. So just very simple. And we've all talked about this a little bit today. And the bottom line, like, this is really more from a business perspective. When we talk about staffing and diversity, it's good for business, right? I understand that we're all doing good work here, but when we work with corporate clients too, every Deloitte, McKinsey survey that you see, when you diversify, when you let people be themselves, when you have that true diversity and equity in your building and inclusion, you're going to do better. You're going to do better things. You're going to do more things. Your bottom line is going to be better. People are going to stay with your organization, not going to leave. So it's important, like paying attention to race and racism and equity and inclusion is just good business. Not only is it good people business, it's just really smart for what you're trying to accomplish.
I saw a beautiful quote over the weekend, and I wish I had meant to sort of write it down for myself, but the basic premise was God loves diversity. And we know that because of how beautiful and complex and diverse the world is, that everything is different. That, even if you were to say, like, what is a flower? Well, there's just a cornucopia of opportunities to think of what a flower is or shows up and how different plants produce them. So diversity is a fact of our beautiful world. And it's something that we should be embracing rather than seeing as any kind of a challenge. Although I think we do have, again, to that idea we had of narratives, we have a big narrative of othering that exists in this country, and it's part of how we were founded. It's part of the principles and rule of law that we set forth at the beginning, and we have not fixed it yet. Maybe with that, Tristan, if you could go to the next slide for us. I believe this is the Dr. King. So hopefully you all are very well familiar with this. We'll move through this really, really quickly. And while we're doing this, maybe Tristan, you could promote Bertus. I think he's still with us. Bertus Downs, who's a friend of ours. But this is from Dr. Martin Luther King, wrote a book called Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community. And one of his observations was that one of the big challenges for Dr. King, I think we are, yeah, right up here. If I can just read this aloud to you, perhaps you can see it, but I know there's a few folks on the phone. A leading voice in the chorus of social transition belongs to the white liberal. Over the last few years, many Negroes, and using his words from the 60s, have felt that their most troublesome adversary was not the obvious bigot of the Ku Klux Klan or the John Birch Society, but the white liberal who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers tranquility to equality. I'm just going to continue to read this for everybody. I know you can follow along. The white liberal must see that the Negro needs not only love, but justice. It is not enough to say, we love Negroes. We have many Negro friends. They must demand justice for Negroes. Love that does not satisfy justice is no love at all. And so you can see, just I'll let you read forward because I know it's sometimes a challenge to follow along. Let's sit on this slide for just another moment. And Colleen, yes, we will post this slide. We will post all of this in the Google Doc that Kareem is making. Tristan, if you could go ahead to the next slide from this, because it's a long piece of writing here. I think we pulled 2 or 3 slides for this. So I'll just give you a quick moment of silence as we gather this and wait for Bertus to join us. Are you there? Tristan, is he promoted? Oh, doesn't want to join. Okay, understood. Just going to try to put him on the spot. Would encourage you all, we shared in the invitation while you're reading this, we shared a piece that Bertus had shared with me about Ahmaud Arbery from a really fantastic website that's new to me called The Bitter Southerner, and encourage you to read that. It's just a fantastic long read, and unfortunately a tough one, particularly right at this moment. All right, if you've had a chance to read this, let's go ahead and put this forward. And again, we'll make the promise of putting the entire quote from this piece in the Google Doc, which we'll share out for you. And this is from former President Barack Obama, who wrote a post on Medium. You can certainly find it if you Google Barack Obama. Medium, I believe it was posted just today. And it's a reflection on this moment. It's one of the challenges I think we're facing right now as a country is a lack of national leadership. I think one of the roles of leadership is always to offer a place of healing and resilience and a sense of destination purpose looking forward. And so you can see this quote from President Obama: if going forward we can channel our justifiable anger into peaceful, sustained, and effective action, then this moment can be a real turning point in our nation's long journey to live up to our highest ideal. And I think Dekendre, thank you, just put that into the chat for anybody who wants to read it. So we're almost up at the top of the hour. I believe that's the final slide we had to share with you. Thank you for hanging with us. So many of you joined us today, over 200 people. We will be back tomorrow. Tristan, I don't remember if we made a slide for this, but Dr. Clarence B. Jones, who wrote the I Have a Dream speech with Dr. Martin Luther King, and has been a good friend to us. In fact, he's the namesake of the Clarence B. Jones Impact Award that we give out now annually. What communications work that has really transformed the world. Dr. Jones will be with us tomorrow. So today was an opportunity for us all to gather, and I'm so grateful to Ahmed for being willing to play with us and just create a space for us to chat. Thankful to everybody for participating in the chat. We will have notes for you and a recording of this in short order, but Dr. Jones will be with us tomorrow so we can hear from one of our elders and hear some of his thoughts. He wrote a really, really important book called What Would Martin Say? And I think that the challenge for us tomorrow, or the conversation we'll gather for tomorrow at 2 o'clock Eastern time, will focus on what would Dr. King say in this moment and how might we all show up and carry his legacy forward, and the responsibility I think we all bear. So with that, we are up at the top of the hour. I'm grateful to all of you for making the time. I hope you are all safe and well. I know for many of you, as we said at the top of the hour when we did that check-in, our hearts are broken, we're struggling, that we're angry and unsettled, and those are all good feelings, and they're right. What we've been witnessing in our country, whether it was Chris Cooper or Ahmaud Arbery or George Floyd, who is family to our good friend and a member of the network board, Jade Floyd, these are not isolated incidents. And as Jade said in her beautiful note at the top, they will not end, unfortunately, today or tomorrow. We all have great work in front of us. I'm grateful to all of you who've been stepping forward to offer leadership. Every single one of us has a role to play here. And so we'll see you back. For those of us who can join us, we'll be back tomorrow, 2 o'clock, with Dr. Clarence B. Jones, who helped to write the Dream Speech with Dr. Martin Luther King. We will share the notes, and thank you, Angela, and to others who are putting pieces into the thing. One of the things we may try to do between now and tomorrow is to create a database so that we can all share what we've done, our organizations are doing, so that others can see and use that for guidance. So we'll take responsibility for that. Also like to just thank our colleague, Amrit Dillon, again. Thank you for joining us. And we will all see you all tomorrow. For now, be well, stay safe, and remember when you're watching the news, a lot of the way that this is being characterized and framed for us is unfortunately is coupling together 2 things that ought to be decoupled. There are peaceful protests. That's what the majority is of happening around our nation. And then as those crowds diminish, sometimes in the evenings, we're seeing little pockets of violence. And certainly that's an expression of some of the frustrations. In some cases, it's literally deliberate actions by all kinds of folks who have entirely different agendas. So I think we all have a responsibility as leaders to try to explain some of the nuance and complexity that we're seeing here. But grateful to all of you. I'm talking too long. Love and peace to all of you, and we will see you again very, very soon. And we will share the link to tomorrow's webinar. Yes, very, very soon. Amy, you'll get that, an invitation to that in short order. Be well.